How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your July 2019 horoscope for Leo. So I'm just excited to do this. For one, happy birthday, Leo, as it starts to begin later on this month. Two, this is a pretty intense month, so shut up and listen. This month has a lot of changes going on, a lot of things happening is a really general way to put it, but we've been talking about this since January. This shouldn't come as a surprise to you. July is going to be intense, but it's really setting the foundation, or I should say not the foundation, but planting seeds that are going to grow really fast in August and September. So although this is going to be a challenging month, get through it, survive, because you will, and look forward to August and September, especially for you Leos. So starting off, I almost said March. Starting off July, on July 1st, we have Mars entering Leo. Now, Mars has been in your 12th house for a couple of weeks now, and that can be kind of irritating and frustrating because you're not sure where those irritations and frustrations are really coming from. Could have some gnarly dreams, a lot of prophetic visions, dealing a little bit more with isolation, and stuff like that. But as Mars goes into Leo, Mars, again, is about our energy, our drive, our intentions, what we're doing in our actions. This also has to deal with, our anger, our frustrations, because Mars severs, it cuts, it's a malefic, it causes issues. Mars is going into a fiery sign of Leo. It's, home sign Aries is also fire, so Mars has a little bit of help here. And as Mars goes into the sign of Leo, which you guys should know all about, Leo is all about that sense of expression, the sense of self and vitality. This has to do with our egos and having pride, but this also has to do with being integrity and authenticity while also remaining loyal. Now, while Mars enters Leo, it is going into your first house. So when we talk about Mars being frustrating and irritating, you may find yourself a little bit more angry than usual, and that's okay. But as Mars transits the sign of Leo, this is going to be an important time to really look at, how are you enacting on yourself? Are you remaining in integrity and in authenticity? Are you letting your emotions get the better of you? Or are you chilling out and taking actions like a lion and not reacting like a gazelle? But then the next day, on July 2nd, that's when we start the solar eclipse in Cancer. And basically, whatever was going on at the end of January, expect it to kind of come back during this time as we start eclipse season. Eclipse season is going to last 2 weeks. It's always a really funky and a weird time. But the solar eclipse is happening in your 12th. And where we should be having a new moon here, and there should be a resetting of intentions, grounding energy, we're having an eclipse where it's kind of that light's kind of getting cut off, and there's an exclamation point, an emphasis around this time. Now, this is happening in your 12th house of the subconscious and repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself, things that you don't see, hidden enemies. The 12th house is about isolation and being alone and stuff like that. It's not a fun house. But as we have this eclipse here, what I think is going to be important is when we do talk about Cancer, we are talking about our needs. We're talking about, trust. We're talking about protection and nurturing. This eclipse is really going to bring out a lot of the things that you could easily repress or not even know, things that you're not aware of, can start to come out, and you may start to see more of what needs you actually need to address now that they're starting to come out and alive. Then the next day, on July 3rd, we have Venus entering Cancer, where Venus was in Gemini in your 11th house. You had fun with your friends, good for you. But now Venus is going into Cancer, where Venus is valuing and putting a lot more beauty and a lot more emphasis on the sentimental, again, protection, nurturing, taking care of, empathy, relating, building those connections, and also valuing the necessity. Now, as Venus goes through the sign of Cancer and she's behaving in this way, she's also going into your 12th house of repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself, things that you don't always see, hidden things, hidden enemies, asylums. The 12th house is a weird area. But as Venus enters your 12th house and goes into there, this may be a positive time of isolation and really looking more at what do you want and what do you value. And that comes through the lens of what are your needs. Then a couple days later, we have Mercury finally stationing retrograde on July 8th. I should know that. But I did a whole Mercury retrograde video. Make sure you guys check it out. However, as Mercury stations retrograde in Leo, you guys should know that Mercury retrogrades are all about miscommunications, and the first house is about you. So maybe you miscommunicate something. the biggest thing is just be aware of what you're saying and why you're saying it. While Mars is in your first house, it can be easy for you to lash out. And Mars is going to be conjoining Mercury almost exactly the day Mercury goes retrograde. So my biggest suggestion is watch where your anger is going, watch where your frustrations are saying or doing, and really realize what you're communicating with it. But on the other note, this does have to do with, I talked about my Mercury retrograde video of, reimagining ourselves. And this is really specific to you as Leo risings, especially because this is your first house. This is about your sense of self and how you see that. And as Mercury retrogrades in your first house, you may be seeing yourself a lot different. And as Mars hits Mercury, this is kind of separating away from who you once were to where you could start growing into a more authentic you. Then about a week later, on July 16th, we have the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, marking the end of eclipse season and the end of that weird gnarly 2 weeks. But this is happening in your 12th house. Now, not your 12th, my bad, the 6th house. Now, the 6th house is about your work, your day-to-day routine, what you're doing, and your health. And as I'm sure you've seen, as Saturn's transit, Pluto, the South Node, the 6th house is getting pretty gnarly. This full moon, or this lunar eclipse in Capricorn, is a really big time to look at, as we have Venus and the Sun in your 12th house, things that you've repressed are coming alive and being acknowledged. What I think this full moon is going to be, even though it's an eclipse, it's cutting out the light. I think this is realizing what structures you've held in place when it comes to things like your health and your work, your day-to-day activities and your habits, and realizing what systems and structures that you have implemented or that the world has implemented on you that don't serve you anymore and that aren't going to work. This eclipse is about realizing that and knowing when to, I don't want to say walk away from a fight, but knowing when to realize that enough is enough. Also, on July 16th, I've been hitting on this because Venus is opposing Saturn on July 16th. So you have Saturn here in Capricorn and its domicile in the 6th house causing issues, and Venus is in Cancer where she's like, I want to, take care of myself more, and I'm starting to understand things that I've repressed, and I love myself more, and X, Y, and Z. Venus is going to be making you feel some type of way, but as Venus opposed Saturn on that day, addressing those wants and those needs may be a no. It may be a little bit difficult. But I bring this up because the next day on July 17th, Venus conjoins the North Node. And although on that eclipse you're going to very much realize what you need to step away from, what systems and structures do not work anymore in the context of your day-to-day activities, your health, and your work, Venus conjoining the North Node the next day is realizing and having a clear sense of vision of what exactly it needs. What does Venus in Cancer need and what is it hungry for? And for you, this is going to be uncovering a lot of your sense of self, a lot of things that you didn't know that you valued or that you wanted to nurture, that you wanted to protect. And as Venus conjoins the North Node, this is really lighting up that area and really being expressive of I need to have these needs met and this is what I want to do. Then a few days later, on July 19th, that's when we have Mercury retrogressing back into Cancer. And like I said earlier, as Mercury stations retrograde in Leo in your first house, you're kind of having this reimagining of yourself. Mercury's going to go back into Cancer, where if you really want to reimagine yourself, redefine yourself, understanding more of who you are better, having a clearer sense of, thought around your personality, Mercury goes back into the 12th house of, again, repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself. And as Mercury goes back into Cancer, I think this is realizing more of the internal things that are driving those actions, that are driving that part of your personality. And as Mercury goes back into Cancer, this is a good time to reflect on the inside things of what you do not acknowledge and what you do actually repress. But then 2 days later, on July 21st, Mercury goes Cazimi with the Sun. It conjoins the Sun. This is when Mercury is being, in essence, purified by fire. There's a lot more clarity here. And I wanted to hit on with this being in your 12th house, I think this is when you're really going to start to get what needs need to be addressed and met here. And more on a critical and on a thoughtful level, not just on a Venusian level where you feel it and it's kind of like when you think you'll love someone because they're hot or something like that, and then Mercury's more of okay, now I actually logically love this person. And as Mercury goes Cazimi with the Sun in your 12th house, this is understandably and logically being okay, I do see where I need to address my needs, and I do know how I'm going to get those. Then on July 23rd, the second best day ever, the best day ever is July 22nd, my birthday, but on July 23rd, that's when we're having the Sun enter Leo, and then it's officially your birthday, and then you can do whatever you want. Astrology doesn't matter. I'm just kidding, it does. But on July 23rd, when the sun enters Leo and goes into your first house, this is when you're really going to start feeling more of like, yeah, this is me. I can actually start fucking expressing myself and actually can feel more comfortable with who I am because I'm a fucking Leo. And then the next day on July 24th, that is when Mercury is going to conjoin Venus as it's retrograding. And I think this is really important because Mercury is still retrograde. You know, it went Cazimi, it's in Cancer, it's in your 12th house. You're realizing a lot of shit right now. Venus in Cancer is still bringing that sense of love and that sense of like, it's okay and we need to take care of you, and what does that look like for you? And as Mercury conjoins Venus, I think Mercury is really kind of just expressing what Venus wants. And Venus is in Cancer right now, being like, I'm realizing the things that I need. I'm starting to not repress these things that I need and that I actually value and that I actually like, even though it involved me kind of isolating myself and finding out more of who I am. Mercury conjoining Venus is kind of being like, yeah, these are the things that I actually do enjoy, and this is helping me be more authentic and more real. But then on July 28th, Venus moves into Leo, and double whammy, you got the Sun and Venus and Mars now in Leo in your first house, so that's a lot going on for you guys. Venus, however, the planet of love and beauty and expression and value, going from the conservative Cancer to the more expressive, more highlighted Leo. And Venus here she really values admiration. She values being in the light. She values the attention and the drama. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing. But as Venus enters your first house, this comes back down to if you're being your true self, if you're, I don't even want to say that. I guess it just comes down to like, I don't want to say do you love yourself, but like love yourself, express yourself. What are you feeling and where are you going to you've got to gravitate that attractiveness to you. That's Venus in your first house. You'll feel more expressive and you'll feel more naturally elegant in a sense, but don't be afraid to express it more, especially in the Venusian way. Like buy finer clothes that make you look better, get a cool haircut or something. And then we finally end July with the new moon in Leo. So by the time we get into next month, and this is why I was saying this earlier, there is good things coming in August and September. It's a lot. But what's important is that we go through what we've got to go through in July to get there. And then by the time we end July, Mars, Venus, Sun, Moon, all in Leo. Mercury will eventually come up to join the gang. The Sun, Mars, Venus, and all that shit will eventually start joining Jupiter for like the whole month of August. This is a pretty big new moon for you guys. Like, you're going to be feeling more of a clarity of who you are and actually feeling normal when it comes to expressing that and being proud about it because you've got that Leo rising energy. But that new moon in Leo is going to be a really big time to really look at you and make sure that you're in check with being the best self that you can be. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next month.